The most insane punishments no one was supposed to know. The justice system is supposed to ensure that offenses are punished fairly, but what happens when that punishment becomes cruel and unusual? Have you ever considered the evolution of punishment and its impact on society? What about the application of cruel and unusual punishments? Join us on a dark and intriguing journey into the world of strange punishments, where justice and mercy are at odds and the line between right and evil is blurred. You won't want to miss on what we discover in this strange investigation. The human mind has long been capable of concocting new and horrifying ways to punish supposed lawbreakers, villains, witches, and anybody else who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The traditional standbys are all too familiar: hanging, burning, and stoning. Torture and execution have been used in some exceedingly cruel ways throughout history. Scaphism. This Persian way of putting people to death is unlike any other. It is one of the most creative ways people have ever been tortured. In the book One Bloody Thing After Another, The World's Gruesome History, it says that the victim was forced to eat so much milk and honey that he would throw up, which brought ants and other pests to him. He also had honey all over him. Most of this honey would be rubbed around the eyes, nose, mouth, genitalia, and anus. Then he would be tied between two boats in a shallow area of still water, where all kinds of bugs and animals that eat dead things would feast on him. Also, his stomach, which is full of milk and honey, throws up liquid waste, which, as it rots, makes swarms of intestinal and other kinds of worms. So the victim, who is lying in the boats and whose flesh is rotting in his own filth and being eaten by worms, dies a long and horrible death. He is pretty much being eaten from the inside out, or he might be lucky enough to die sooner. Blood Eagle. The Blood Eagle comes from stories about how Vikings were killed in the north. The condemned person's back was cut open so that the ribs could be broken and bent up to look like wings. Salt was poured into the wound to make things even worse. As a final blow, the lungs are pulled out and draped over the rib to make wings for effect. It's a good thing that people disagree about whether or not this really happened or is just a story. But no matter what, it's scary that someone took the time to come up with this. Breast Ripper. These horrible things look like two-pronged forks that look like snake fangs but are made of iron. In the book Victims and Values, A History and a Theory of Suffering, it is said that they would be heated up and then used to rip off a woman's breasts as punishment. This would leave the woman with bad scars and make her lose her breasts, but the infection that would follow would often kill her. Women who were accused of having a miscarriage or of adultery were most likely to be given this instrument. Some people say that in 2014, ISIS used a similar tool on a woman, but they called it the biter. Reports say that the biter was used because some women were said to not be wearing the right clothes. Crocodile shears. Men, of course, did not escape such barbaric punishments related to their manhood. Crocodile shears were tubes made of iron that had teeth inside. They would be heated and put on a man's penis as if it were in a crocodile's mouth. This would lead to castration, which in those days often meant a slow death from an infection. The crocodile shears had a very specific purpose: to cut up people who tried to kill the king. After ripping off the man's member, they would rip off other parts of the body like the fingers and toes. Regicide was the act of trying to kill or actually killing a king. It was the worst thing a man could do, so he had to be punished so that no other man would try it again. You could have gotten the iron comb instead, which would have been worse. That was a heavy comb with sharp spikes that went over your flesh until there wasn't much of you left. People were often combed, and if that didn't kill them, their heads were cut off. Peña Kulai. Peña Kulai, or the punishment of the sack, was another strangely specific way to be killed. In ancient Rome, it was used when someone killed his or her parents or another close family member. The person who was sentenced to death was sewn into a leather sack with a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster. The whole bag was then thrown into some water. If the animals didn't kill the person who was thought to have killed, drowning would. White torture. Even though the term white torture can be used to describe any kind of mental torture, in this case it is used more literally. White torture is a form of sensory deprivation in which everything a prisoner sees, touches, or eats is white. The guards wear all white, the lights are on all the time, and no one speaks. There is no color. It was proven in the case of Amir Fakhravar, who was arrested in his home country of Iran in 2004 and tortured with water for more than 8 months. The physical pain of sensory deprivation isn't as bad as some of the other tortures on this list, but the damage it does to the mind is unmatched. Fakhravar was quoted as saying that when he got out of prison, he was no longer a normal person and couldn't even remember the faces of his parents. The brazen bull. This cruel punishment was used in ancient Greece. It was also called the Sicilian bull. How do we know? Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian, wrote about it in one of many history books he wrote about different cultures of the time. He says that a bronze bull would be made to be almost as big as a real bull. People who were given the death penalty would be shoved through the door on the side of the thing. The person was then roasted to death by putting a fire under the bull. People even say that the bull was made so that the screams could be heard by people watching. If this sounds bad, you might not think it was such a bad way to die by the end of this video. Strappado. Strappado is a painful way to torture someone, but unlike many of the other things on this list, it doesn't always end up in death. In Strappado, the person who did something wrong is tied up by their wrist behind their back. Shoulders are almost certain to pop out of place because of the awkward angle, but if they don't, weights can be added. Strappado is thought to have started in the Middle Ages during the Inquisition, and is still played today. Crushed by an elephant. It is an oddly specialized technique for carrying out the sentence, yet there is no denying the efficiency of this approach. As you would have guessed, it was a widespread in regions of the world where elephants are prevalent in their native habitat, primarily in South and Southeast Asian countries. It was a common practice to train elephants in order to ensure that the trampling would be as severe as possible. Chinese water torture. You might be wondering why this is in the same room as instruments that hurt very badly. Well, slowly going crazy might be worse than losing one or two body parts. The torture involves slowly dripping water on one part of the head. After a long time, this is said to become unbearable and drive the person crazy. Mythbusters put it to the test to see if it really works, but the person didn't last very long. After not even 2 hours, he asked for the experiment to end, saying he was starting to lose it because he felt stuck and had shoulder spasms. Imagine doing this for days. Some people don't think it would work so well. You can only find out one way. Death by boiling. Individuals in earlier times enjoyed fiddling about with their food, whether it was meat or convicted criminals. The condemned would next be cooked to death by being submerged in hot oil or water for an extended period of time. Despite the fact that there was no visible display of blood during the process, this procedure still had its own following in both Europe and Asia. Cropping of ears. This particular penalty was mentioned in The Hunchback of Notre Dame as executing by clipping people's ears. And, if the offense was not too serious, their ears were occasionally just nailed to the pillory for a while. Except in cases when the convicted died as a result of a later infection of the wound, this punishment did not kill the convicted in the majority of cases. Hey, thanks for watching this video on secret punishments. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe for more content.